Welcome back to another video, guys. Today we're going to be talking about how does Bitcoin work. If you've been watching other videos in this playlist, we've talked a lot about money, the evolution of money, what makes good money, the properties of money, and I think it's an appropriate time now to talk about Bitcoin specifically in terms of how does Bitcoin work, how does Bitcoin achieve the properties that we've discussed earlier, and basically get a look under the hood, right? I want this video to be a very high level discussion around Bitcoin and how Bitcoin works. I'm not going to get very technically in depth. I want this video to be short, and I want it to be something that I could basically send to my mom or my grandma, and they would get an understanding of Bitcoin and how Bitcoin works, right? And to start off, we're going to talk about fiat money and how money operates today. The way money operates, at least in the United States and most of the developed world, involves trusted third parties. This diagram shows kind of what I mean when I talk about trusted third parties. If I want to engage in a transaction with someone today, I typically have to use a bank and maybe I use a debit card if I'm not using cash. And we trust these institutions, whether it be a bank or government, to sort of keep a balance of everyone's accounts, right? So they process the debits, they process the withdrawals, and we have to basically rely on them and make sure that they're being honest. Bitcoin system is a little bit different. So the diagram I just drew is a better illustration of how Bitcoin works. And as you can see, each of the little boxes represents a computer. These computers are what's known as full nodes. And in the Bitcoin network is maintained and validated by full node operators. And what does this mean, right? So Bitcoin is software. Bitcoin is open source software that is available for free on the internet. The same way you use, say, something like Adobe Photoshop or Word processing, right? These are proprietary softwares, but Bitcoin is open source. Anyone can download it for free. The main client for Bitcoin is known as Bitcoin Core. And anyone is able to contribute to the code base, anyone is able to look at the code base on GitHub, and anyone is able to download it and run their own full node. And whenever you run your own full node, what you're doing is you are essentially becoming a gatekeeper to the ledger. The same way that banks keep accounts, account will say Eduardo Lima has X amount of dollars, Joe Smith has Y amount of dollars. The Bitcoin system keeps tabs in what's known as outputs and inputs, right? So outputs, you can think, are basically the amount of money that one has in their savings account or in their account. And an input is sending money to someone else. So this drawing that I just put up kind of shows what I'm talking about when I talk about a ledger. Gives you an idea of what this ledger looks like. Now, this is, I guess, going to be my version of a Bitcoin block, right? And you're familiar with this word blockchain. And a blockchain is a buzzword that basically is a chain of blocks, but a block is a collection of data. And these, in Bitcoin, this data represents transactions. So it represents sending an amount of money from one address to another address, right? And what's unique about this ledger is how this ledger reaches consensus, how transactions are included on this ledger, and also what this ledger actually looks like, right? Whenever you download a Bitcoin software client, whether it be a mobile app or a desktop app, you're essentially creating a private key that generates a public key, and this public key then generates addresses, and these addresses are random strings of numbers that to an outsider, and letters To an outsider, someone looking at the address, it doesn't really mean anything, right? It's not your name. It doesn't have anything associated with your identity. So this means that Bitcoin is pseudo-anonymous, pseudonymous. This is important because it means that no one is going to stop your transaction. No one's going to pick on you and say, hey, we don't like you and what you're doing, so we're going to not include this transaction in the same way that your bank can do. Whenever you create a transaction on your software, you are essentially signing a transaction and you're letting the network know that your address is basically authorizing a particular output to be spent. So an output that belongs to you is becoming an input into a new transaction, and you are broadcasting this to the network in what's known as the memory pool. Right? So this drawing that I just put up, it demonstrates kind of what the network looks like during the moment in which you've broadcasted a transaction. That transaction goes into the memory pool. The memory pool is this nebulous pool of unconfirmed transactions that miners, you've probably heard this term if you've been digging around the Bitcoin space a little while, miners pull from this memory pool and include these transactions in their blocks. So this illustration that I have behind me is sort of a rendition of what the topology of the network looks like at the moment when transactions are being relayed across the network, right? So you have some computers that are miners, and they are denoted by little M's inside the box, and other nodes that are not miners. And what the miners do is they collect transactions and they sequentialize these transactions into blocks. And these blocks, they basically just take the inputs and outputs, and they say, okay, this is going to be the new updated form of the ledger. And how these miners reach consensus on what the current state of the ledger is through a process that's known as proof of work. So this new illustration kind of shows what a blockchain looks like in a visual form. Each of these squares is a block, and I hope you can see what I have written here. This is kind of like a zoomed in picture of this block, and I have the word not and previous hash, right? And as you can see, these are sort of at the head or the top of the block. And when miners collect transactions, they compete in this competition that's known as proof of work, in which they try to solve a very difficult math problem. And this math problem involves running SHA-256 against a number of different block header bits. And this block header contains certain information that is particular to the blockchain. But two things that are important that for the purposes of this video, are previous hash and the nonce, right? So the previous hash basically means that miners have to include the previous sort of answer, if you will, from the last block in the new block, plus a new piece of information, right? So they have to not only include a reference to the previous block, but they have to add this new piece of data that answers the complicated math problem. And this complicated math problem is you're going to take a string of data, run it in SHA-256 and hash it, and you're going to want to produce an output that meets the difficulty standard. So simplified, this means that you could think about this as a competition to basically solve the problem for X, right? What I mean by this is you're wanting to, I'm trying to pretend like I'm explaining this to my mom. You basically need to solve this math problem before anyone else, and you have to reference the answer from the last math problem. And this math problem is very, very difficult. It requires a lot of computation power, and this computation power is actually what secures the network. It's what prevents people from putting fraudulent entries on the network. And this math problem is constantly updating itself in difficulty. Every 2 weeks, the difficulty of this math problem is adjusted, and that happens automatically due to the way the software functions. And this is so that a new block is created every 10 minutes. So it's going to take, on average, 10 minutes for a miner to solve the math problem. And once they have solved it, they broadcast it to the network, and all the other nodes on the network, if you think about sort of the second drawing I had up there where it was all the different computers, right? All the nodes look at the block, and they can very quickly determine whether this is a valid block or not. And then if it is, it meets all the rules, all the standards, they include it as the newest block, and the competition continues for another 10-minute interval until a new block is found. So this process, what it does is it allows for a couple of properties for Bitcoin to exist. Number one is permissionless-ness, right? You don't have to ask anyone to download this software. Number one is censorship resistant. No one is going to, stop you from broadcasting, and no one's going to censor a transaction you have. Another thing that this enables is un-cofiscatability, if that's a word. I believe it is. It makes your money unconfiscatable because your Bitcoin exists in the digital form on a distributed network. So for someone to take it away, they would have to sort of take away all the computers that store this data, and they would also have to, after a significant amount of time has gone by, say 1 hour, after 60 minutes have passed, there have been 6 new blocks. So with every block that is created on the blockchain, the security of your transaction becomes more and more secured, right? And what I really want to emphasize at this point is that this flat hierarchical structure of a network allows for a very anti-fragile system that is able to withstand attacks and has demonstrated itself to be extremely robust. And if we think about, sort of the evolution of money, and we think about where money has been, where money has gone, Bitcoin just makes sense that as we move from the industrial era to a digital information era, that we would find a form of money that would, sort of function well in this new era. And what I think is one of the best things about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin, from a evolutionary standpoint, really is sort of the next iteration of bookkeeping. Even if we go back to yapstones, which I talked about in the first video, which was a form of money that was used by a previous civilization, money has always been a ledger keeping system, and it's been a way to keep account of who owes what to whom and who has what. And some people refer to Bitcoin as triple entry bookkeeping. This is something that I'm going to get into in future videos, but you could think about the fact that Bitcoin doesn't just allow you to know who has what. It also timestamps this information and creates a track record of how this money has moved over time. And so it really shows that this social consensus that we have of money is evolving and is becoming stronger and is becoming more robust. I hope this video was informational. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, share this with a friend or family or someone you think needs to see it, and please follow me on Twitter @elima_III. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.